And of course, this is what lovers of Shakespeare tend to do, is they go, well, I don't think he really wrote that.
That was probably a fletcher.
Yeah. What?
I had it on slow motion this whole time.
Oh, no! Yes.
So here's what happened, YouTube.
Yeah.
Move over.
Oh, okay.
So, David and I had the most amazing talk about...
It was incredible. It made this look just, slight.
About Romeo and Juliet when he directed me, and then we have since been in it again as actors, as Friar Lawrence and the Prince.
Right.
So we had this amazing conversation about Romeo and Juliet, and the complexities and the hilarities, and then I realized, as a new YouTuber, that it was in slow motion on the filming. So now, I just want to talk to David Montee.
We're just talking about different things.
We're just talking about different things about Shakespeare. So one day that video will happen. But today, I just want to chat about you and Shakespeare love and your amazing books.
We had some technical problems.
Oh my gosh. Which David and I can talk about Shakespeare for hours. So, my bad as a new YouTuber. Oh my God, I'm so upset, but I'm so glad you're here.
I know, I can tell. I can tell.
So many expletives, all in Iambic Pentameter.
Yeah, right.
We don't have to act like that didn't happen. We can just keep talking.
Okay, good.
We don't have to be like,
because it did happen.
Romeo and Juliet, yes.
Right.
Yeah, so tell me about just Shakespeare in general. When did Shakespeare first grip you? What was your first kind of nugget?
It was there were two or three things. My sister, who's unfortunately passed away, she was 5 years older than I was, and she was in, I think, high school.
Yeah.
And she brought home one of her books for literature class, and it was like 4 tragedies of Shakespeare, and it was like Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, what you would expect, probably Macbeth, and I don't know, probably not Lear, probably Othello, I don't know. And so, I'd heard about Shakespeare, and I was a big reader, from 5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
So I kind of snuck her book and was looking at it and reading it and going, what is this? This is like incomprehensible. I can't figure what this is about at all. But I started, but then I would hear Peter O'Toole or Richard Burton doing Shakespeare with this wonderful voice and all of this kind of, and I just went, wow, that's so cool. Watching Peter O'Toole, not in Shakespeare, but in Beckett, and Lawrence of Arabia and things like that. And you just went, wow, these guys, I want to be them. I want to be them. So that was my first kind of trying to read Shakespeare. And I forced myself to read through Hamlet, but I didn't really know what was going on. I just loved to read it aloud and go, wow, this sounds so cool. The sounds of the vowels and the rhythm, which was natural. I was a drummer, so the kind of, even I started playing the drums when I was in grade school, so even the sound of the rhythms, you kind of you get that right away if you're a musician. I think it's harder if you're not a musician. And then I saw Zeffirelli. I still remember it. It was my parents had a little cabin at the lake, and I snuck away with my sister. I must have been 14 years old, something like that. 13, 14, which is the same age as Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
In a little theater in Grove, Oklahoma, that was showing Romeo and Juliet, Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet. And I saw that, and I was just blown away by it. There was nothing I didn't understand about it. The language, of course, it was heavily cut.
Yeah.
But the language was so beautiful, and the acting was so incredible, and the visuals and the cinematography was amazing. And then in high school, I did Jacques and As You Like It.
You did?
I did.
I didn't know that in high school.
I did, and I did that. So, it was doing Jacques here. was like revisiting Malvolio. I'd done Malvolio in college, and then I did Malvolio in the Shakespeare Festival here. Yeah. So there was like a 30-year gap or more than that probably. So I was 18 when I did Jacques, and I was 62 when I did Jacques again. So that is like 44 years between the first time I did Jacques in high school and then here. And then Malvolio, it was more like 35 years probably. I was 22 doing Malvolio in college, and then I think 55 doing it here. But those are my first 3 exposures to Shakespeare. And then my drama teacher, who, has a lot to answer for, thought, okay, I'll encourage him even more. So he had me memorize for a kind of showcase that he was putting on in the summer, To Be or Not to Be. So I did To Be or Not to Be too, the famous Hamlet soliloquy. Yeah. And of course, when you're young, you have, at least me, you have no fear. You have no sense of, I didn't go to Interlochen, I was in Oklahoma, right? So if I'd been at Interlochen, I'd probably been looking around at everybody going, oh my God, I'm not worthy, I can't do this.
That was me at Interlochen.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But in Oklahoma, somebody says, here, do this To Be or Not to Be from Hamlet. And you just go, hell yes, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. And you don't think, wow, boy, it's kind of arrogant of me to even try to do this when I'm like 18 years old, 17, 18 years old, and have no idea what some of it even means, And then I just started reading Shakespeare and loving Shakespeare. And I hadn't read all of the plays until I was working on my doctorate. And then one summer I took an intensive with a great professor at University of Kansas named Jack Orch. And he had us read a certain number of plays in his class, and then I did an independent study with him where I said, okay, I want to read with you all of the plays that we're not doing in class. So he said, sure. So in that one summer, I read all 36 plays back to back, basically.
What was that like?
That was incredible. I understood it like I had never understood Shakespeare before.
How?
Yeah.
What?
Well, because after it's like, I guess it's kind of like a foreign language, isn't it? That like the more you're exposed to it, the more natural it seems, and the more it's just a part of you. And so all of this stuff, when you read Shakespeare in one play, and you'd go, man, this is hard. I have to keep looking at the notes at the bottom to know what the hell they're talking about. And then you'd read the next one, and you'd go, oh, I remember that this phrase came up in the last play, and it meant this, and so now in the context of this, I understand what it's saying. And by the time you get to the 5th or 6th play, it's like you're just reading contemporary prose or contemporary novel or something. You only have to check every once in a while. Yeah. And when you check, it's usually because it's a textual crux, meaning it's a textual problem that this isn't clear in what the original quarto or folio was, so they have had to amend it or decide what it probably was. And so you have to figure out what it is they're talking about or why they changed it that way. And the interesting thing about modern editions of Shakespeare is that you look at those emendations that editors have done. Oh, this doesn't make sense when I read it, so I think if I change this to this, it'll make much more sense. And I wish I could come up with an example, but you go back to the original quarto or folio, and you find that they should have just left it alone. Yeah. That it makes perfect sense if they just didn't try to make it something it's not, to make themselves happy about it.
When I first heard about the folio as a resource for actors, I was fascinated because of that. Right. Because you realize that it was correct the first time, and that people have kind of put their own, I don't know if it's societal or scholarly, but the folio helps actors. And they're punctuation crazy. Editors are punctuation crazy. They want to put all of this punctuation in so that they can make sense of it. Okay, let's look at this phrase, and then let's look at this phrase. But you realize that like in some of the sonnets, let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love that alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. No, it isn't. You don't let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. thesis
Love is
statement.
not love, which alters when it alteration finds. You know, that if you get rid of all of the punctuation that modern editors have put in and go back to the punctuation that's there or not there, as the case may be usually, in the early printings of it, you realize that, yes, it makes more sense if it flows forward as opposed to stopping all the time, you know. And I think actors starting out tend to make that big mistake that they have to go slowly and chop it up so that the poor dumb people in the audience will know what they're saying.
Yeah, which ironically is how people will not understand a thing.
Exactly. I mean, because listen to me and listen to you, when you get going excited about something or passionate about something, you're not, well, I'm passionate about this and I want to say more about, you know, you're just flowing, you're excited.
Yeah.
And I think that that as long as the actor knows what it is they're saying and why they're saying it this way and where they're eventually going with it, then the people follow it surprisingly easily.
Yeah.
You know, whenever we do the interlocking Shakespeare, I always have people that I know say, are you changing things? Did you kind of modernize it or change the text a little bit to make it clear? Because it made sense to me. And when I read it, it doesn't make sense to me. And I'm going, well, no, I just knew what I was saying. And if I know what I'm saying, chances are pretty good, if I have any skill at all, you'll understand what I'm saying.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to make the actor I'm talking to on stage understand what my point is.
Yeah.
So.
And you mentioned that in your book. Show us your book.
Yeah.
So your most recent book, we have translated.
This book, Shelby? This book?
Oh, that
book?
So that's your first book.
That's my first book.
Which we'll talk in a second.
Right,
and then
right.
This is your most recent of
this one I'm particularly, it's not that I'm not pleased with this, but this one I just put out myself, you know, through Amazon. And I keep going back. Sometimes I go back to the translating Shakespeare, and I feel like this was two books. This was two books. This was just too much information all at once. And I actually, you know, if I were to do it again, I would probably make it a series of books, you know. But I guess it's better priced if you just buy it, you know, in one. You don't have to buy 3 or 4. But this one, I felt like it was, I go back to it now and I look at it and I go, and even though it just came out, I actually wrote it, the first draft of it, well over a year ago.
Nice.
And I look at it and I go, I'm probably prouder of this one, and it's because it's got a broader scope, and it's also talking kind of from my heart about what I think young actors should focus on in terms of letting the art make them be better people. Yeah. And no matter what they end up doing professionally.
And I love your section on, or your essay on Shakespeare, which does translate, it does reference your other book, which I actually find extremely approachable and...
Well, good, I'm glad to hear that. But I also
had you in class.
Right, exactly.
And so for me, it felt like I actually read translating Shakespeare after not doing Shakespeare for 6 years because I was in Los Angeles.
And you were preparing for one of the great Shakespearean roles of your entire life, and anybody's entire life.
Yeah, so I got Rosalind, and then got terrified. It's so large. But then also, I hadn't done it for 6 years. I hadn't done that text work, everything, and I trusted it was there somewhere, but that was right about the time your book came out. And I remember poring over it and having this tone of you're taken care of, but also everything, it just flooded back for me. Right. So it seemed, because I was trying to read it from a perspective, just because I know and adore you, of what would it be if I didn't have anything.
It's mutual.
Thank you. But if I didn't have any training before, and it seemed so approachable, but then having had Shakespeare training plus with you, plus being directed by you, many times, but twice in Shakespeare by that time, it felt like being in the room with you.
Oh,
really did.
that's nice. Well,
Yeah.
good. I actually think, it's like I say, I don't dislike the first book at all. It's just, I'm further away from it now. But also, I think that it's interesting that I wrote this book first and this second, when in actuality, if people were going to read both of them, read this one first and then this one, I think.
Yeah.
Because this one is more in general about what a life in the theater is like and a life in the art is like, and about college auditioning and empathy and things like that. And then this is really focusing just on working on Shakespeare.
Yeah, if you want to prep it, how you even go about it.
Right.
And even the first few chapters are so clear on, let's take a step back from the text for a moment and even talk about why Shakespeare is important, which is what I love about this new book and the collection of essays you've written, with the Shakespeare-centric essay answering that exact question of why young actors should be at least exposed to it, if not fall in love with it like I did and change my life. So the book, Don't Put Your Daughter on the Stage?
Question mark? Right.
Within that question and that reflection of that your book addresses, the Shakespeare portion of that is what? Why should young actors do Shakespeare?
Because he's the richest playwright that we've ever had in the English language, right? That the characters are deeper, the text is beautiful, and that if you can clarify the thought in Shakespeare text, then not only do modern texts seem easy in many ways, they are it's hard to go back to modern texts after you've had the richness of Shakespeare. There's one other playwright that I love doing in not the same way as Shakespeare, but that I would revisit if given the chance. I haven't had a chance to do any of his work for years and years and years, but there was a time when I did more of this playwright's work than any other playwright. I was always cast in his plays, whoever was doing it, and that's Harold Pinter. And the interesting thing about Harold Pinter and Shakespeare is that Harold Pinter was also an actor as well as a writer, and that Harold Pinter was about how we use language to obfuscate. We use language to cover up what we mean. Whereas in Shakespeare, we use language to express precisely what we mean. And I think the spectrum of those two playwrights is fascinating to me. I love doing Pinter because I love all of the subtext and all of the things that are hinted behind these terse words. And then Shakespeare is the opposite challenge in that you know that nobody expresses it more perfectly in a given moment than the characters in Shakespeare. They're so in the present moment that everything comes to them as an inspiration and a passion.
And I think that's why people use the idea of paraphrase as such a key tool for especially younger Shakespeare actors, but that's what I strive for when I'm doing my text work. But I think it's a double victory in a way, or a benefit in a way, because you then put it in your own words so that you have confidence, you know what you're saying, and then you look at your words and go, these are horrible compared to what I get to say.
Exactly,
so then you get to be more poetic, more eloquent, more clever, more funny. Then for me, it's kind of, oh, thank goodness I get to go back to not speaking how I would speak.
Right. And for younger actors who are just starting out with Shakespeare, when you get them to paraphrase, you help them uncover what it is they're missing. Because they will paraphrase in most general terms, and then you'll go, but what about this phrase here? You're not doing anything with the paraphrasing with this line. So that's there. So you can't just ignore it. Why aren't you putting a good paraphrase for that one? And it's usually because they don't know what it means, or they haven't come to grips with it yet. And then that helps them really come to grips with what they don't understand in the text, and then that becomes clearer, and then they can speak it with confidence and assurance.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Right.
And the other thing you talk about in this essay is the importance of students knowing the authorship question.
Yeah. You really want me to get into that?
I do, because of that, because of the like, oh, I don't know if I should touch it, because the point you make is that they should know about it. Mm-hmm. And why is that?
Well, I think because just kind of cards on the table, and just in the interest of complete honesty here, and I know that this really disturbs many colleagues, but for most of my life, I was very much a traditional Shakespearean authorship person. I bought the whole story of, the guy from Stratford, the lad from Stratford who marries the woman older than he is, has kids early in life. He's 18, she's 26. The dad was a big wig in Stratford-on-Avon and mayor or whatever. And then there's gap years where we must assume, it's more than likely than not, most of the authors say, that he joined a traveling band of players and went off and ended up in London and became, the greatest patron of an aristocrat. Just out of nowhere, this hayseed from Stratford, became the patron of the Earl of Southampton, or became the protege of the Earl of Southampton, and wrote beautiful sonnets for him, and Venus and Adonis and The Rape of Lucrece and all of this. And then he became the most famous playwright of his age, and you just kind of go, could that have happened? After a while, you go, when you learn more and more and more about Elizabethan society, and how very restrictive it was in terms of sexuality, in terms of liberties you could take of the aristocracy, you could take depending upon what your social strata was. It raises more and more questions about, is this sounds great. This sounds like an Horatio Alger, America, pull yourself up by the bootstrap story.
It sounds like an American dream.
Exactly.
So we
just buy into it and love it. Yeah.
We hope it's true.
Yes, it should be true. It absolutely should be true. But then when you start thinking, how did he know what trees were growing in the orchard in the southwest corner of Verona, which is actually in the plays Two Gentlemen of Verona and Romeo and Juliet? How could he have known that? How could he have known about falconry when, unless you're an aristocrat, you aren't permitted to indulge in falconry or to practice and take up that hobby or whatever?
And nowadays we can follow an Instagram account or watch YouTube videos and learn all about it.
Exactly. And so we think, oh, well, he must have just picked it up. And then you think, okay, how do you know so much about the law? That he could actually, quote the law and speak of it in legal terms and even make fun of it, like he does with the gravedigger in, Hamlet, and the way Portia speaks in The Merchant of Venice. How could he know so much about the military? How could he know so much about Italy and the Italian culture and the Commedia dell'arte? How could he possibly have used borrowed strongly and directly from these stories from France, from Scandinavia, from Germany, from Italy, from Spain, when these texts had not yet been translated into English? How could he have known about them? How could he have written sonnets passed among friends that implied sexual relationships with aristocrats when he was just this guy from Stratford, lowly born guy from Stratford? How could he have been this amazing actor in London, coming from Warwickshire with a strong Warwickshire accent, which was almost,
like a pirate does.
Yeah, exactly. That people in London would not even probably at first have understood what you were saying.
Sure.
So all of these questions come up the more you learn about Elizabethan and Jacobean society. And you really start to question, how could this this be? It's a nice fairy tale, but how could this be? And if he was the greatest poet of his age, as Ben Jonson talks about in the Folio preface in 1623, how come when he died in 1616 that nobody wrote huge verses to his death?
Yeah, that was the point in your book that made even the most sense to me.
Yeah. And why does the statue in Stratford, when it was erected, and it was drawn by a passerby right after it was erected in the church, the bust of Shakespeare?
Yeah.
When someone first saw it a couple of years after it was made and put in there, it shows kind of a well-fed, paunchy guy with a sack of grain underneath him. And then later on, it was changed apparently to be a writing table, and somebody put a pen in his hand and a page. But that was when the statue was remade decades later.
Wow.
Why are there no books from his library? Why are there no letters? Why are there no manuscripts? Why could he not sign his name in a secretary hand? He could just basically make a mark, an S, and why are all his signatures scribbles and different?
I mean, the folio has odd spelling sometimes, but you can still understand the word.
Well, sure, but of course that could be the printer's errors too.
True, yeah.
But there are just so many things that you ask, that you have to ask, and then you go, well, what about all these really great scholars, that have written these books, and whenever anybody questions the identity, they always go, well, it's like, believing that the mafia killed John Kennedy, or believing that, the Holocaust was not a real thing. And I get really angry at that, because it's not about a conspiracy theory, it's about a pseudonym. It's simply a pseudonym. I don't deny that there was a Will Shakespeare who was an actor and an entrepreneur in the theater in London. I don't know whether he was a good actor or whether he acted very much. We certainly don't hear about him acting very much, just a couple of references, and most of them happened decades after he was dead. But he was a rich guy, owned a lot of property, was a usurer, was basically somebody who loaned out money to people at incredibly high interest rates. He took land away from people in Stratford. He partitioned it. He sued people at the drop of a hat.
Sounds more like a manager.
Exactly. And so you go, well, what if Will Shakespeare and William Shakespeare were really two different people? And it just happened to work out that Will Shakespeare was in the theater business for a time too, and William Shakespeare, often hyphenated Shakespeare, which was probably, a lot of people think, a reference to Athena coming out of Zeus's head, shaking a spear, fully grown with wisdom and everything else right away. And I don't have a candidate, I don't say, oh, I think it was Earl Oxford or Sir Francis Bacon or anybody, Queen Elizabeth, Christopher Marlowe. I don't know, but my gut tells me that it was not this kid from Stratford. That he might have even written some, and he might have even tinkered with the plays that the company used. That may be some of his writing in them. That's why some of the quarto's different from the folios and all this stuff. And I think it's more likely, if you go that route, that he probably wrote the low comedy scenes,
Oh, sure.
Because he was probably he was probably being from Warwickshire, a great clown and a comedian and all of this kind of stuff. But the main thing why I think it's important to talk to kids about that, to know the things, is that you start learning an incredible amount about Europe and England at the time that Shakespeare was writing. And the more you learn about those things, the more you appreciate the plays and the times that the plays grew out of. And
how some of them even got past censorship. How clever they had to be in.
And you appreciate the plays a lot more. So I think the authorship question is a door that opens for people to actually enjoy the plays as they are more. And I think the only reason people sneer at people who doubt the authorship is because they've built entire business and academic careers on this idea that William Shakespeare is William Shakespeare, who we think he was, and all of this. I mean, imagine a James Shapiro or Stephen Greenblatt or a Stanley Wells or all of these very established Shakespearean scholars who are also usually connected with the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust in Stratford, Ontario, or Stratford-on-Avon.
Yeah.
And so it's a business. Stratford is a tourist business.
Oh, I've been.
Right,
and
me
I
too.
took a picture of
I
my
love
house.
it.
I
love it. Me too. I love it.
Of Merry Wives of Windsor.
Oh, I love it. And it makes me feel like I'm back in Shakespeare's time when I go there. But I think that they have a vested interest in making sure that nobody questions the authorship.
Yeah.
Because that brings down their whole business. Yeah. And as far as all of these Oxford scholars and everything, it makes them look like idiots if they've spent their entire life promoting myths.
Right.
You know?
And that's in any industry too. If suddenly there's this discovery and then it just wipes away years of research.
There's this immediate fear of, oh my God, I'll look like a fool. And I think most authorship doubters go, no, you won't look like a fool. I mean, it's always evolving.
Yeah.
You're always discovering new things. Yeah. And look at the Oxford Shakespeare now that just came out a couple years ago, the new edition. Now includes Edward III, now includes plays that were never included before.
Yeah.
Now they're starting to say, oh, these plays were probably collaborations.
Yeah.
They weren't probably the way we have them now. They weren't by one man. They probably said somebody added this and somebody added that. And so gradually, slowly but surely, I think people are finally coming to terms with the idea that this is a myth that we've been kind of promulgating for centuries, but there are a lot of holes in it.
And the most exciting part of the authorship question for me is the idea that it could be a woman.
Oh, it could be.
Yeah. And you had two names in your book, and then there's also Amelia Bassano. Is that right?
Amelia, I think Bassano was either a married name or a maiden name. Amelia Lanier
is the same person?
Yeah. And she was a musician and dark complexioned and everything else.
And the name Amelia comes up so many times.
It does.
Bassanio.
Right. And then there was also the Countess of Pembroke.
Yeah.
Mary Sidney, I believe, who, and the Earl of Pembroke was one of the patrons that put up the money to publish the first folio.
Nice.
In 1623, yeah. Now, to me, that's a stretch.
Yeah.
That it's a woman.
Yeah.
But it could be.
Yeah.
It could be, and the Countess of Pembroke had an early literary circle of writers and artists that she
where book clubs
patronized
began.
And stuff. Yes, exactly.
Have the wine flowing and
so maybe there was a collaboration. I mean, Sir Philip Sidney was a part of it, and
because you just mentioned that the female parts in Shakespeare are also unparalleled, and Juliet, for instance, which you directed me in when I was.
Which at some point earlier this morning we talked about.
Oh.
Well, how did you start to like Shakespeare so much?
You.
Well, I mean, but you mean that was your first exposure to Shakespeare?
Yeah. So
Winter's Tale.
Yeah, when I got into Interlochen Arts Academy, which you were director of at the time of the program, I think it was first semester was Winter's Tale. So my first audition was that?
No, it was the
final
final show.
Okay,
of the year.
So by the time I auditioned for David Montee's Shakespeare play, it was the one that everyone wanted to get into. It was, I don't know if you know that or not, but it was like, ooh, David's Shakespeare was the height of, you are an awesome actor and you get to work with the best. So when I auditioned for The Winter's Tale, I was a sophomore, and I knew I wasn't going to get a part. It was my first year. Sophomores usually didn't even get into the Shakespeare show, and so I was like, I'm not going to get the young, pretty lead Perdita, so I'll just come in with the time monologue, which is one speech in the whole play. And I was like, my practical brain goes, I can get this part. Which, who ended up being cast was this goddess, like, time, as if she was time, and this very much an upper
a young Caribbean woman.
Yes, a gorgeous. Right. So I come in due time in my audition as a stage manager.
And she's a jazz singer now. Did you know that?
And that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So the presence, the grace, and I come in with my little notebook and go, and then in Elizabethan verse, 16 years have passed, just want to let you know. And lights will come out. And leave. And your face, David, was like, okay.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting.
But
you were a sophomore.
I was a baby, and I made a big, bold choice, but I was just so excited from what I'd just even been exposed to so far to try for it at least, right? And so you cast me. I was one of 2 sophomores in it. And I had 2 lines.
You did? Yeah.
What was so amazing about that opportunity was that I got to sit and watch you explain this text, work with incredible upperclassmen who are all peers in the industry now, but that I certainly as a sophomore was looking up to so heartily. And
well, you're a bit of a peer in the industry now too.
Well, thank you so much, David Montee. I just remember soaking in everything. And I don't know if you remember this famous story, but I left my script in rehearsal at one time.
Yes,
and
I do.
Someone picked it up and could not remember, or they couldn't figure out whose it was because I hadn't just written notes on my 2 lines. I
do. I remember that. And that was one of the things that incredibly helped your chances the next year for Juliet. Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, because absolutely, I said anybody who is taking it that seriously and doing that much work and listening and really doing that kind of text work, and it was clear. And besides that, you were right for Juliet too.
Thank you.
Now I'm looking at this and it's saying low battery.
That's fine.
Oh, it is. Okay.
It's,
Okay, it's still recording you?
It looks like it,
but
okay. This is not the priority.
Okay, well, I just want... But no, we were talking about, you were saying you were surprised that you got Juliet.
Oh, yeah.
And I just don't know. That surprises me to hear it. I don't know why.
I don't know if I had the confidence even.
I can't think of anybody else in your class that year that I was even seriously leaning toward.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they would have popped up in either, I think it was the Female Odd Couple that was going on at the same time against it. Yeah.
Yes.
Or, and there was somebody in the Female Odd Couple that I was really hoping for a different role.
Sure.
In Romeo and Juliet.
You have to share.
Right.
Yeah.
But we have to share, and I give them this and they give me that.
And by that time, I was such a Shakespeare devotee because of your classes and because of being exposed to it.
Yeah, but Shelby, seriously, honestly, I don't think I don't think you had somebody after those first auditions in my mind that was any strong competition.
So what did you see in that audition in particular? You had known me and you knew I was a hard worker and was falling in love with this text, but what did you see in the audition? Intelligence,
directness, and vulnerability, all combined. I thought that you were smart, clearly, in dealing with the text, that making it clear. I thought you have an energy and a directness in the way you talk to people that I think Juliet has to have.
Yeah.
And yet I think there's a softness permeating it too.
Yeah.
So I thought all those 3 things together kind of make a perfect Juliet. You can't have a dumb Juliet.
No. We have seen it.
Right. I mean, absolutely. You can have girls that are just absolutely darling, sexy, and beautiful, but unless they're smart and direct and articulate, they can't. You like you say, we've seen Juliets that are just pretty girls and just look like your idea of Juliet, but if they can't be strong and direct at the same time, then it's not going to work.
And that's so clear in the text that that's who she is.
Yes.
But even within my preparation for the audition, I don't know if I let myself see that, because that was, we talked about the practicality, the humor. I mean, you really let me find my Juliet, but it wasn't outside of the text.
Right.
It was all there, and you saw that.
Right.
And I think the biggest trap of Juliet is for actresses who are older. I mean, I was 16, 17 when I played it, and I felt the age, even though it was technically 13. But when older actresses, even 20s, play it, they feel like they have to play younger.
Right.
Rather than just what's youthful about you right now.
Right.
And that, you know, it's like they get cast because they're petite. And that's it.
Yeah.
And you're right, the look of it. So I wonder if my disbelief at being cast as her was this idea of the look. I don't know if I saw myself as that Juliet look.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, is that unusual?
I don't know.
I mean,
I was a teenager. And,
I know, but I think all but the most arrogant of teenagers look in the mirror and go, "Oh God."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I wish I were handsome, or I wish I were beautiful, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that probably that everybody tends to feel that way, and interestingly enough, the people who don't are probably the people you don't want to be playing Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, because they don't have that vulnerability.
Yeah.
That you need. They have instead a self-confidence that kind of overcomes all of the things that a good complex role is about. You know, the contrasts of assurance and insecurity.
But that role, I mean, being cast in that role and then doing that role both changed my life. I think it was the first time I saw myself as a lead. I was always the hard worker, and I would help people with their homework, and I felt like I was a leader in some ways. But I don't know if I'd ever seen myself as a lead actor before.
I don't recall, though, in all of the rehearsal period, and of course we're talking 16 years ago.
That's true.
But I don't recall. I don't recall you or Romeo or Tybalt or Mercutio, the actors playing those roles. I don't recall them ever having any big potholes that they ran into or barriers. It seemed for you guys, I mean, I'm sure you guys didn't feel this way. You're always going, oh, am I good enough? All this stuff. But I don't recall any big roadblocks. I'll be honest with you. I've thought about writing to a couple of actresses in that play that played other roles that I was terribly hard on. And I regret it to this day.
What do you think you were hard on them about?
Pushing them. Pushing them. Casting them when perhaps they weren't quite ready for those roles. And then allowing my frustration about it sometimes in the rehearsal period to kind of overshadow the help I should have been giving them. But I think, you always look back as a teacher.
Oh, yes.
I think you always look back and go, I should have been a little easier. I should have been a little gentler. I should have been a better understanding.
But I feel that too now as a teacher.
Right.
And the way I direct.
I think it turned out fine.
Yeah.
I think they actually did quite well
Yeah.
in the final performances.
But the process.
The process was tough because I do remember that at least one of them, and I'm thinking basically of two people, that at least one of them just didn't seem to be able to memorize lines. And it
Which
was
is such the first layer of.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, especially when you're in a situation where you're trying to also prepare them in as good a way as you can for what they're going to face if they actually do have aspirations to be a professional.
Yeah.
You wouldn't make it through the first week.
So I wonder if what you were reacting to or frustrated by, also from a teaching perspective, is do the work. Even if that was hard for them, all of the rest, you felt like, even if we were hard on ourselves, we were doing the work.
Right, exactly.
Maybe you perceived it as...
that they weren't working to their capacity.
Yeah. And that is frustrating as an educator.
But then maybe that wasn't in them. Maybe that wasn't in them to do.
Sure.
That's one of the things that I really talk about in this, is that there's some people who just aren't ready to do that yet. And at Interlochen, it's tough. In a place like Interlochen, it's tough because you're working with people who are more than ready to do that.
Right.
And you're also working right beside them with people who aren't. And that doesn't make the people who aren't less vulnerable or less important.
Yeah.
But you're constantly trying to weigh this. If I don't push them, then the people who are ready and are doing the work are suffering as a result. But if I do push them too hard, it's not really fair because they can't help it ultimately. You know, they're just not ready for that kind of work yet. And maybe they never will be. Maybe it really is all about how much of your emotional life you're comfortable putting out there. And sometimes not learning your lines or not knowing your lines or not remembering your blocking is a kind of cover-up for the fact that this is not really fun for you.
Or it's a defense mechanism that you can point to.
Right.
Because memorizing lines is not acting.
Right, exactly.
But it is something, it's a reason you can say of, oh, that's why I'm not fully investing.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah,
it's an avoidance technique.
Right.
Yeah.
You know. And then, you know, I worked with the year before in an interesting thing, you know, I worked with the guy we both know, who we both adore, who played Leontes in Winter's Tale.
Yeah.
And he was so hard on himself. Yeah. And he was actually very good, you know, and I never had any doubt that he was the right person to do it and that he was doing an amazing job with it, but he really doubted himself.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it was just the opposite. No matter how much I tried to say, you're great in this. This is a good role for you, and you're handling it quite well. He never really felt like he was.
Never believed it.
And to this day, I think he feels that way. You know, interestingly enough, we've had a couple of conversations about it.
Oh yeah, I've had a drink with him about it too.
Yeah. And I keep saying, you are so hard on yourself. You were brilliant.
Brilliant,
in that role.
and
you were.
Oh, I remember that so.
And so moving. You know, I get like tears up just thinking about it.
Yeah.
But that's such a moving play anyway.
Yeah.
But he and his partner, who is now quite a successful actress in California and TV and films, playing Paulina. They were his scenes, Leontes and Paulina. That scene in the trial with the two of them and Hermione. That's one of the. You remember Howard Hintz, fellow English teacher, was a Shakespeare lover. To this day, he thinks that that's probably the best Shakespeare scene of all the plays he saw.
Wow.
At Interlochen, yeah.
Wow.
They were just that was amazing.
That show was electric.
And you were in that scene.
I was there.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it was probably me that
right. But you know, I mean, in fairness, it is you to some extent, because when you're in a scene like that, and when you're on stage in a powerful play and scene, it's like one person, even if they have no lines, if they are not 100% there, can destroy it.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it was everybody.
And the audience looks to people on the side sometimes to know how to feel.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I remember Howard Hintz with Juliet. He wrote me a
he was
handwritten
so good about
card
that. Yeah.
That I mean, I was already feeling on a high in a lot of ways because again, I had this fear of even doing it. And when I got the first laugh in the balcony scene on opening night, I was like, let's go! Yes, because that meant they understood it and that they were connecting and that I had brought a Juliet they didn't expect. Because, like we mentioned in the before times, in the slow motion times, that people think of the balcony or the whole show as kind of just an emo, a lot of emotion.
I know what you're getting at. I think that they basically think of, you know, the cliched lovers, the Romeo and Juliet, the Samson and Delilah,
and the silly teenagers too.
Right. Well, actually, I think sometimes they don't think enough of the silly teenagers. You know? Because that really is what the first part of that play is all about. They are silly teenagers feeling adult passions for the first time.
And not maybe knowing how to handle it.
And that's the comedy. That they're feeling these things, they're feeling these urges and these sexual stirrings for the first time. And they don't feel in control of them. And they're scared of that and exhilarated at the same time. So I think that's where a lot of the comedy comes from, because everybody's experienced that. Everybody.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Oh my gosh. So I'm going to ask you some random questions.
Okay.
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 You know in podcasts and stuff when they're like, here's the quick 8 questions or anything, have you heard those?
No.
Remember? Remember James Lynch?
Yes. Yeah. Inside the actor's studio.
Should I do it like that? Here's the question.
Yeah, right.
So it doesn't have to be one-word answers.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I have some questions I'd love to ask. So what's the best Shakespeare production you've ever seen? The most impactful for you?
Well, I already talked about the film of Zeffirelli, but let's talk about a stage production.
Of Romeo and Juliet?
No, not of Romeo and Juliet. It was Winter's Tale. Yeah, it was Winter's Tale. And it influenced so much of the way I did Winter's Tale at Interlaken. It was startling. I had never seen the play before. I'd only read it once. And I remember when I read it in that doctoral summer I was talking about, where I read all the plays. I don't know if that was in this one or the earlier one we did. I don't know. You'll have to see. But I read Winter's Tale. And I remember I finished it, and I went into Dr. Orch, who was my teacher, mentor, and I said, what the hell? Yeah. The statue comes to life at the end of it? And that's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, that must just be a laugh riot on the stage. People just think, this is stupid. This is a stupid play. And I remember I wrote in the thing I would, in all of the 37 plays that I read, I'd write excellent, good, okay. And Winter's Tale was like a question mark. What the heck is that? And the language is difficult. Yeah. When you read it, particularly when you hear it, not so difficult, but when you read it, it's very difficult.
And the meters really irregular.
Yeah. But I saw a production at Stratford, Ontario, directed by David William, who was artistic director at the time. It was 1986, I think, and it was the year I remember it was because we were there, and I believe this was the year that Laurence Olivier passed away while we were there. Wow. And so at the beginning of some of the plays, they were doing a memorial thing. And I remember that this production of Winter's Tale started with a completely dust-covered cobweb stage, and Time, who does the middle thing, comes out at the first and cleans it off and everything with Schumann's Songs of Childhood playing. Bum, 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 bum. Very simple piano thing. And then the play begins, and I remember Combeferre was doing Leontes. And I saw it, and I just went, this is stunning. Not only is that final scene not clownish, it's heartbreaking. Yeah. It just is so moving. Yeah. And that heavily influenced the Interlaken production I did. Yeah. And I think that's, when you said what comes to mind, that's the first one that popped into my mind, so I guess that must make it true. Yeah. It was not a 2 or 3 word answer, was it?
I love that. I think the best one I've seen was your Winter's Tale.
Is that it? Right. Well, then I owe a lot to that Stratford production.
Yeah,
because,
it was so, I didn't know enough by then to even be able to articulate why it was so gripping. But because of that production and seeing it as many times as I did, just watching it in the rehearsal room, and then seeing tech come to life, I don't even know if I had that much experience and that much and the space we had.
And do you remember the music? We used music by Vangelis.
Yes.
That's, to me, such dramatic music. Yeah.
It was just stunning. And I still remember you used Duke Ellington for Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah,
and as a director.
Oh, yeah. Because we set it kind of in in Italy, pre-Mussolini Italy, basically. Yeah. With little kind of saber bayonets for the swords and things. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And the music we used for Duke Ellington was Such Sweet Thunder. The suite he wrote specifically for Shakespeare plays.
What?
Oh, yeah. You remember that beautiful saxophone thing? That's for Juliet. He wrote it for Juliet.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the wedding march?
Yeah.
Mendelssohn wrote for for Midsummer, which we use all the time.
Yeah.
I just love that. And as a director now, I think in sound, and I think it's because of that. But that production, being a part of it, felt like such an honor, and then watching it was so much education, and so it just implanted in me a deep seed of this is what I want to do with my life in any way, and that's been the constant.
This just went black.
Bye.
Do you want to ask me these questions? Do you want to move over and ask me these questions here?
Oh,
or are we done?
Thanks for being flexible.
Sure.
David Montee.
Okay, now are we both on? Here.
Snuggle.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
All right.
So, in that way, do you have a favorite Shakespeare play?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Plays that mean more to me, like Lear does now, because of the Lear we did together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course Hamlet. You know, I mean, there's just so much in Hamlet. You just keep going back to it, and there's something new all the time.
Yeah.
But no, favorite? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Changes as you age, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, different parts of your life, you have different favorite plays.
I think that's why it was so impactful for me to really have my first exposure to Shakespeare be The Winter's Tale. Because it's so complex and deep, and for me to feel like I understood it even on some level, it opened me up, rather than starting with the smaller plays and things like that.
Yeah, and also it probably made Romeo and Juliet easier for you too, because the text of Romeo and Juliet, beautiful as it is not nearly as thorny as The Winter's Tale.
I love when you say thorny in your books. That's exactly what it is, because it can be untangled, but it's scary at first. Because we say complex or we say difficult, but I don't know if that's true. It's just different.
Yeah, right.
Do you have at least favorite Shakespeare play?
Oh yeah.
Never want to see, never want to touch.
Yeah, I do, but it won't be a popular choice.
Okay.
Because a lot of people like it, but I dislike Taming of the Shrew.
That's my least favorite too.
Yeah.
It is. I've seen enough productions of it, and I don't know if that's just me as a female, so I'm glad to hear you say that too, but I don't know a way in unless it's an all-female cast and then you're commenting on it at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. It's gimmicky then, you know. Yeah,
some great scenes, but the resolution, it's just,
It's very problematical, isn't it?
Yeah.
But and of course this is what lovers of Shakespeare tend to do, is they go, well, I don't think he really wrote that.
That was probably a fletcher.
Yeah. Well, you know, there was a play, Taming of a Shrew, that came before it, that I think probably someone else wrote, and that he tinkered with it.
Yeah.
That it just, you know, that's how I kind of excuse it.
Okay.
Because look, Kate doesn't even have a good soliloquy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I don't think the end in a soliloquy. It's a performance. And she has like an 8-line thing about why is he treating me so badly.
Right.
And that's it. And that's so unusual for Shakespeare.
Yeah.
His heroines have soliloquies.
Yeah. Yeah, and as a woman, I have no interest in playing that.
Right.
Whereas all of the other huge, amazing female roles, I can't wait to play, you know? And I just don't understand that one.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Yeah, agreed.
Okay, good. Well, great minds.
Yeah, right. Do you have a favorite Shakespeare character?
Probably not. No. I mean, a million spring to mind, but I can't think that one jumps out way ahead of the others.
Yeah. In answering that question, do you think about that in literary ways? Do you think about it in parts I'd want to play, stuff like that? So do you have one that you'd love to play?
Oh, the one that got away is Hamlet. I've always felt if somebody had just freaking cast me as Hamlet when I was the right age, I would have been the greatest Hamlet ever. Truth. But you know what? Ian McKellen's doing it now.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, and how old is that? Yeah. He's like 10 years older than I am, I think.
Well, when I was auditioning for colleges, the stretch piece where you do something you'll never play was just a gender swap.
Right.
And that still kind of works today, but now gender swapped so much of the time, and so then it became maybe the age thing. Like one of my dream roles is Paulina. She doesn't have to be so old, but Judi Dench played her in National. So
she can be any age.
I know.
Paulina can be any age.
I think so too. As I assume she's slightly older than Hermione in the kind of mentor lady in waiting way.
I would probably think of it that way too, but that's not essential.
That's true.
You know?
Yeah. But because when our actress did it in our production, it was
They were kind
perfect.
of contemporaries, basically, yeah.
Right, yeah. But that's not even really a stretch anymore. So age-wise, yeah.
Yeah.
Hamlet it up, man.
Yeah.
To ham or not to ham.
If I can get my knees if I can learn the fights and get my knees to work.
There you go. Yeah. I'll be your fight double.
Okay, all right. Yeah, right. Yeah. Good. Yeah, okay. Take the place. Take the foil and go.
What's the most underrated Shakespeare play?
Oh, wow. The most underrated, I think it's Coriolanus. I love Coriolanus.
Yeah.
I just think, it's got a problematic ending, but I think, particularly right now in our political times, it's a great play to do. And I also, if I can name a couple more, I also like Troilus and Cressida a lot. And I also think a play that nobody pays enough attention to is All's Well That Ends Well.
Yeah, I actually don't know that. very well. No.
Oh, God, it's got one of the best female roles in the canon.
Nice.
Yeah. Helen is just a wonderful character.
Yeah, and I've seen monologues from it for years, and I've just never dived in.
And it's an early romance, So it's like it paves the way for the Winter's Tale, and Pericles and Cymbeline and
Nice.
stuff.
Yeah. Pericles to me is my...
Oh, I love Pericles.
Yeah, but I've only seen it a couple times, but reading it, I just love the fairy tale aspect.
Oh, me too. And when I did Pericles at Interlochen, I cut the hell out of the first 2 acts.
Yeah.
Let's
get going.
Actually, maybe the first 3 acts. No, first 2 acts. And then Act 3, Act 4, Act 5 play like gangbusters. And, of course, it was co-written with George Wilkins. And George Wilkins wrote a novelization of it.
What?
Yeah, George Wilkins was a brothel owner, brothel keeper
Which makes sense in the play.
Yeah, in Suffolk. Right near the Playhouse.
Yeah.
And George Wilkins and Shakespeare apparently co-wrote this play.
Amazing.
Of Pericles, and the first 2 acts are just a mess. It's a bad quarto anyway. It's hard, and it wasn't included in the folio, so they probably didn't have a good text of it. But the first 2 acts are kind of a textual mess, and then the last 3 acts are sublime. They're just beautiful.
Yeah.
Just beautiful. Those characters
Yeah.
But George Wilkins wrote a novelization of the play as it was done on the stage. Like they have novelizations of movies today.
Yeah.
And it still exists. There's still copies of it. And the Oxford Shakespeare uses bits and pieces of his novelization in their Oxford Shakespeare version of the play.
Wow.
Because Marina has this beautiful speech where she convinces the guy not to rape her. And see, in the Pericles text, there's nothing
Pretty short.
there. It just changes. He just changes his mind. But in the Wilkins novelization, there is a section that is a speech that is so Shakespearean. You know it wasn't written by Wilkins.
Yeah, because right now it's as if she's just so virtuous, and that's it.
Oh no, she gives it to him and says, if you do this, then you are saying that your whole kingdom should do this. You are the representative of what should be best in your kingdom and everything. And that makes him go, you're right, I shouldn't be doing this.
Wow.
Gary Taylor, who is the professor who oversees with Stanley Wells the Oxford Shakespeare, he's the one that in his editing of Coriolanus incorporated some of that.
Wow.
He's also, in my production of Cardenio, wrote some of those scripts or some of those speeches in Cardenio too.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to talk about Cardenio. That's a whole nother video.
Well, we'll have to do this more.
I would love that. And now I know how to work the camera.
Yeah, right.
Last quick ones.
Okay.
Is there an overrated Shakespeare play? Like, done too much? Or touted too much?
An overrated Shakespeare play.
I know we love all the things, but...
Yeah, do you think there is? Do you think there's an overrated Shakespeare? Taming of the Shrew, of course, I think is overrated.
Yeah.
One that I have never appreciated as much as other people have appreciated is Henry V. Yeah,
I like Henry IV more.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I like Richard II more.
No.
And Henry V to me, the reason I don't appreciate it as much is that there doesn't seem to be enough for me of a character struggle in it. It seems like he's just an amazing guy from the beginning,
hero,
and just as an amazing guy all the way through the end where he marries Catherine.
It's like when I played Richmond in Richard III, and he just comes in at the fifth act, and he's perfect, and there's no complexity.
Right.
But in me,
well, he's Elizabeth's what? Grandfather?
Grandfather, yeah.
So you can't screw around with it too much.
I'm amazing. I killed the bad guy. Yeah. So, and did Henry V, was that written and performed before 4?
No, I don't think so.
So
well,
maybe,
it depends on the whole authorship
that's
thing.
True.
It depends on if you believe that the Life and Victories of Henry V, which is an early play that people say, oh, Shakespeare stole some of the stuff from Henry V, which includes stuff that's in Henry IV Part 1, Part 2, and Henry V. If you believe that that was written an early play by whoever wrote the other Shakespeare plays, then yeah, it was written before Henry IV.
Yeah.
But
I just wonder if, because people had seen 4, they just picked up at the hero part. Just wonder if they saw the origin story.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? At the end of Henry IV, the epilogue, Part 2, where he says, oh, come back and see Henry V, and you'll see more of Falstaff.
Yeah.
Which is a lie.
It is,
I'd want my money back.
Yeah.
If I
and they're like, fine, here's Merry Wives of Windsor.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He's dead, sorry. He died before the play even started.
Right. Yeah. One more question.
Okay.
Let me make sure the battery's still on. I think so. Yes. Oh.
Is it in slow motion?
I don't know.